Hey, we're really blessed this morning. As a church, we're really blessed with so much depth in the house. You know, across the board, people who speak, people who lead, people who serve, people who go into the community and run community stuff. We're so blessed with all the things that you guys do. You're running businesses. Whatever you guys do, you're representing Jesus so well. And this morning, we're going to, some amazing ladies are going to be sharing this morning. So we have a little bit further on, we have Julia and Christy. But before they come up, we're going to, an amazing young lady who her husband shared a testimony a few weeks ago called Veronica, going to share part of her story. Let's give Veronica a hand this morning. She comes this morning. Give her a big hand.
Good morning, church. My name is Veronica. I'm married to Lawrence, and we have a daughter, Mia. I was born and lived most of my life in South Africa up until 4 years ago when we decided to immigrate to New Zealand. I was raised in the Catholic faith. My mom taught my brother, sister, and I to pray from an early age, and she made sure we went to church every Sunday. My mom has always had an incredible faith in God and Jesus. On the other hand, growing up with my dad, he did not believe in God and he never prayed. Instead, he used to turn to witch doctors and fortune tellers. The reason he did this was because his mother, my grandmother, practiced witchcraft, and it was all he knew. My dad loved us and took care of us, but he had a very short temper and would easily get angry even over the smallest of things. Whenever he faced any problems, he would turn to alcohol, and unfortunately, he couldn't stop just at one drink. He would fight with my mom and become violent, breaking things in the house. From a young age, I grew up very fearful and always feeling that I was not enough, that there was something wrong with me due to the things that were done and said to me by my grandmother as a child and many other things that happened in my life. One evening, when I was approximately 8 years old, my dad was building a shelf in the room that my sister and I shared. As I was tired and wanted to sleep, my mom said I could sleep in my parents' bed. As I was lying down and trying to get comfortable, I felt that there was something in the room with me. As I looked up towards the end of my parents' bed, there stood a demon. I screamed and shouted, calling for help, but no one came. It was as though they could not hear me, and the demon just laughed at me, tormenting me, and said he was coming for me. Moving from one side of the bed to the other, trying to get away from him, I then looked at my mother's bedside table and saw her rosary and the cross. I then called out to Jesus to help me. As I called on his name, he appeared on my dad's side of the bed. He was dressed in a long white robe. I could not see the exact details of his face, but his hands were like a very bright light. He stretched out his hand to me and said, "Do not be afraid." I went immediately towards him. The demon continued to appear, but Jesus reassured me not to be afraid. My mom then came into the room, and the demon and Jesus then just disappeared. A few years later, when I was 13 years old, I was crossing a road and was hit by a car, landing headfirst on the road with my mother witnessing this. I was then taken to hospital where I got stitches on my knee and was discharged and told my head would be fine, just some bruising, and that I could go home. After being at home for a few days, the one side of my skull was very soft and swollen, and so we went back to the hospital. I had a CT scan and an MRI done of my head and was seen by a neurosurgeon who told me I had internal bleeding on my brain. He advised that this was life-threatening and that I needed surgery to relieve the pressure on my brain. I was told I had a 50% chance of surviving the surgery, and if I made it through, that there was a 50% chance I would have some form of disability, and my life as I knew it would not be the same. As the surgeon had been working from early that morning, and it was now evening, he wanted to get some rest before performing the surgery due to its complexity and length. He did reassure me, however, that if my condition changed throughout the night, that the nurses would call him. My mom stayed with me that night, and we prayed. I fell asleep, and my mom sat at my bedside, praying until she could no longer stay awake. Early the next morning, I was taken to radiology for another MRI, as the surgeon wanted to see if anything had changed or worsened before the commencement of the surgery. I had the MRI done and was taken back to the ward where the nurses were preparing me for surgery. We then heard the surgeon shouting on the phone, and he looked a bit angry. He then asked me if I did do the MRI and if I heard the machine run, and I replied yes. He then said it seemed radiology had sent the wrong scan results to him, and there was no time to waste, so he was going to take me down himself to radiology to have it done. I then did the second MRI that morning, and we waited for a long time before the surgeon came to see me. He then proceeded to examine my head and then said that he cannot medically explain this, but that the MRI scan I had just done showed no bleeding, swelling, and just a scan of a normal healthy brain. That my skull had hardened and there was no medical reason to keep me in hospital, and that I was free to go home. He did then ask if anything happened during the night, and my mother just said to him we'd been praying, that yes, we do need doctors when we are not well, but then there is God. Even though God healed me and has done such incredible things in my life, I believed in him, but I don't think I really understood what it meant to have a relationship with God. I would call on him in times of need, and when things were good, forget about him. Last year, just before Easter, I had what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening. I felt a heaviness on my chest and an urgency to get right with God, that there was no time to spare. I had a realization and conviction of all my sins, and that I had not confessed or repented of them for a number of years, and that I needed to forgive people who had hurt me throughout my life. I then started to read the Bible, which is something I'd never done before, and completed an Alpha course. I started seeking God in a way I have never done before. I know the only reason I'm standing here today is because of him. He protected me, healed, and redeemed me. I am thankful and grateful for all he has done, is doing, and is yet to do in my life. Thank you, Jesus, for I know that you're always with me. Thank you.
Wow. Far out. Thank you, Lord. Veronica, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your bravery, your boldness, your openness to share all of that with us. What a testimony. How good is it just to hear in real time, in real life, somebody, a testimony that you can't deny. Wow. I'm a doctor, and that would blow my socks off. I would also question the radiology. Well, kia ora whānau, my name's Christy. It's awesome to be here together on this Mother's Day. It's a real honour to be able to share this morning. Thank you, Pastor David, for asking me. trying to bring together a message that is encouraging to women and to mothers, since this is Mother's Day, and also wanting to make it relevant not just to women. So if I could get my slides up, that would be awesome. Cool. So I've entitled this talk Holding Firm, and I maybe asked the wrong person, David, if you wanted a really cushy, nice Mother's Day message, because I'm going to make it a little bit real. I'm going to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and hopefully you can get some wisdom out of what I have to share. I'm going to start talking about struggle and trial and the hardship that comes by in life, but I want to try and give some hope that actually struggle is not something that we need to shy away from. Trials aren't things that we can avoid, and it's not something that we need to be fearful of, but actually we can overcome in Jesus. And He's equipped us, and He's prepared us, and He's with us through this every step of the way. So I'm going to start with some of Jesus' words from John 16. So John 16, verse 33. So this is Jesus talking to His disciples. Just before this, He's been foretelling of end times. He's been talking about hardship. And He goes on to say, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So I get a few things from this passage. The first thing I get is, we will have trouble. We shouldn't be surprised if we have trouble, when we have trials. And this just talks to anything in our lives. And if life has taught me anything, if you're not struggling with one thing, then it's another. You know, there's very seldom are there seasons in our lives where everything is totally sweet. You know, there are challenges, be them big, be them small, whatever they are, there's challenges all the way through life. Let's expect them. Let's not be thrown by that. But actually, what else this says is that in Jesus, we can have peace. And we can have the assurance that He has overcome that struggle. He has overcome the world and everything in it and of it. I think all of us mothers, if we put our heads together, I'm sure if we're honest, we can say that being a mother is, yes, it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's such a gift. But it's also going to be one of the hardest, most growing experiences of our lives. Am I right? Any other mothers agree with me this morning? Julia does? Good, Julia does. She's talking next. So, look, I can think of the prolonged seasons, babies waking all hours of the night, the utter exhaustion, all the challenges that come with growing little ones. I remember going into our very first COVID lockdown, which now almost seems a lifetime ago, but our eldest was about 20 months, so not quite 2, and our second was 7 weeks old. So I had this newborn, very unsettled baby with this child who, not even 2-year-old, who could hardly talk to me, and my husband, who's Nick. He was an essential worker, so he was off to work each day, and all of a sudden I was on my own. And you lose your support, feels like you lose your support network, or you can't go out and see people. People can't come to you. All of that, flipped on its head. That was a hard time. And we can all think of our own hard times. There's been over the years, there's been hardly a year that's gone by that we haven't had a medical emergency in our family, that we haven't had to call an ambulance, that we haven't had, a close person in our lives diagnosed with cancer. There's lots of different struggles that go on in our world. And I'm going to read next from Romans, from Paul, who was an apostle in the Bible, who knows a lot about suffering. So he was in prison on and off. He was ultimately martyred for his faith. And let's just read what he has to say about suffering. So he says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And I just love the opportunity in amidst the struggle of life, the opportunity that actually that suffering will produce in us a perseverance that we wouldn't have had to navigate or experience or develop had we not been through that hard time. And that then goes on to create this depth of character, and in that hope for the future. So we should expect trouble, but we don't need to be shying away from it. We don't need to be fearful in it. We have God's strength to be able to try and navigate these seasons. Another verse from Paul in Philippians 4:12-13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. This is Paul, who's been in and out of prison, often relying on other people's for his day-to-day needs. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Isn't that an encouragement? That even if things might seem hopeless, even if things might seem completely broken, we can rely on God's strength in those seasons and in those moments. And Veronica, man, your testimony just talks to that, doesn't it? That in those situations where it seems hopeless, when you had this significant brain bleed where your life could have been ultimately ended or completely changed, God totally turned up because you called on him and you invited him into that broken space. There's a lot of talk in the secular world at the moment about resilience, and I think there's something to learn from this. And it's this is ultimately God gives us resilience and builds in us that character and that ability to be resilient in these hard times. So, just next slide. The next slide is a definition that I've come across about resilience, and I really like this. It's about the contentment in the acceptance of what is. So the ability to be able to be content in whatever circumstance that you're in. That's what Paul was talking about as well. Being content whether you're in need, whether you're in plenty, whether you're in hard times, whether you're on the mountaintop. Being content in that season. And accepting what is happening as well. I remember growing up, we had this plaque on our wall, this wooden plaque, and it had the Serenity Prayer written on it. And I never really understood what it meant, but as time went on, I've come to appreciate what the words of it say. So I'm just going to read it this morning. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's so good. There are things in our life that we cannot change. We cannot change the fact that you were hit by a car and things were looking grim. That's a fact. But in that, there was something that could be done about it, something that we could change, something that we could be engage in. And that was praying, that was reaching out to God. And I think we can look at that in any part of our lives. I think it's so dangerous for us to just accept and just go, oh, well, this is my lot. I'm just going to sit here and be a victim of whatever's happened. But actually, there's an invitation there to accept and be content despite what our circumstances are. But there's an invitation to also engage and change and do the things that we can. This is biblical, I promise. And we will look at that in just a moment. But before we do jump to what we can do and what the Bible tells us to do about this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we might do in our own strength or accidentally do. So often when we're struggling, when we're feeling heavy, we try and fill our lives with other things. We become busy. We become hurried. Rather than seeking our strength from God, we seek it in other places. And that can be as little as not giving our attention, our affection, or our focus on Jesus. Not making space for him to be in and amongst and a part of our everyday life. I've heard it said, where we choose to place our focus will directly impact how we experience life. I'm going to read that again. Where we choose to place our focus will directly impact how we experience life. If you choose to focus on your social media or your busyness, or you've got to get all these things done, or I've got to achieve this myself, that's how you will experience your life, through that busy lens. But if you choose to focus on Jesus, or on protecting portions of time, space, mental energy to be in a relationship with him, that's how you will experience your life. I've also heard it said that if Satan can't get us to sin, he will keep us too busy or distracted to focus on him, to focus on God. And I think that's a powerful tool that the enemy will use to distract us, to keep us away from God's love, affection, and attention. But good news, we're not alone, and we have weapons, we have tools, we have strategies that God has put in place for us. So my last slide, we're going to read from 2 Corinthians 10, verse 4 to 5. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. This is the gold right here. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Because we have a responsibility over what goes on in our mind. Nobody else can control that ultimately, even though our attention has been so hotly fought for. We have a responsibility to take captive the thoughts, to submit them to God, and actively fill ourselves with God's truth. So in order to live in peace, we should, despite trouble, we should expect trouble. We need to put our focus, our attention on Jesus, on the things of God, aligning our minds and our truth with him, and on actually investing in our relationship with a God who loves us and wants to know us. So on that, I'm going to pass over to Julia.
Just got my lovely assistants over here. They're going to bring my table of props over. Thanks, guys. Good morning. Ko Julia tako ingoa. My name is Julia, and I'm here for the second part of the message. And my message this morning is about bread. This is going to get us ready for morning tea. So, I've got 2 types of bread here. Hopefully you can see up the back there. I've got my first type, which is the white sliced bread. This is made from refined flour. It's made with instant yeast. You'll find rows and rows and rows of it at the supermarket. It's pretty inexpensive. And then my second type of bread is a sourdough bread that was made by my special friend Mark last night in his oven. How lovely is that? This is made with a live culture starter in place of a yeast, and it takes a lot longer to make. And you can find sourdough generally in a bakery or sometimes in the bakery section at the supermarket, but they only make a few loaves of it, so it's not quite so easy to find. And it's probably 3 or 4 times the price of a loaf of bread. Both of these are bread. This one is great for certain things. This one's great for sausage sizzles. Mums, it's great for fairy bread, isn't it? For your kids' parties. It's great for a club sandwich. But the thing with this one is that after you eat it, often, because of what it's got in it and the way it's made, you'll be hungry pretty quickly after you eat that one. This one, because of the fermentation process, it's got lots of minerals in it that are really good for you. It's high in protein. It's really good for your gut and your digestion. It can actually help you lose weight as long as you don't eat the whole loaf. You don't put Nutella all over it. It's not cheap, it's harder to find, but when you eat it, you'll be full for a long time. The Bible talks about bread. Jesus prays and says, God, give us today our daily bread. And we are told that we can't live on bread alone. And today I want us just to focus a little bit on John 6:35, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life, and whoever comes to me will never go hungry again. So Jesus is talking about being the thing that fills us, that nourishes us, that grows us, energizes us, brings us life, heals us, comforts us. We get to choose which bread we're going to feed ourselves on in our life. Bread that fills us for a moment, but ultimately leaves us quite unsatisfied, or bread that fills us and nourishes us. We've all got needs that we're trying to meet or trying to have met in life. We've got the need for love, for peace, for rest, to be loved, to be known, to feel like our life means something and has a purpose. And our world is really obsessed with fulfilling desires and for instant gratification of those needs. A new car, another holiday, nights and nights lying on the couch watching Netflix, doom scrolling, Deliver Easy, a Gucci handbag, another match on Tinder. And all these things, not all of them, are always bad or wrong. But when we choose to only feed ourselves with these flimsy versions of bread, they will only bring flimsy, temporary happiness, joy, rest, peace, and we will hunger again. Only in Jesus can these needs truly be met. He says, whoever comes to me will never go hungry again. And a chapter before this, he meets with this woman. Jesus meets with this woman. She's collecting water at a well. And he gently starts to reveal himself to her. And he starts talking to her about the mess that she's found herself in her life. She's had a number of husbands. She's now with someone who's not her husband. She's, desperate. She doesn't know what she's going to do with her life. And they're talking about the water that she's collecting. And he says, you're trying to fulfill your thirst with this water. And this water isn't just the water that she's collecting. The water is the things that she's trying to feed herself with to make herself feel loved and accepted. He says, if you come to me and drink the water that I offer, you'll never be thirsty again. Everything else that we try to use to satisfy our needs will leave us unsatisfied. And just like the white bread, it's a great quick fix. If you're hungry, if your kids are hungry, it's often what we turn to. Have a sandwich, make some toast. But we all know that it's not that nourishing and that our kids are going to be coming and asking for food pretty quickly after that. And it's the same in the choices that we make. We can be left really unsatisfied when we choose the flimsy white bread. Don't get me wrong, I love a night on the couch watching movies. I really enjoy going shopping. Our family really prioritizes holidays. All these things aren't wrong and bad. It's where we get our nourishment from. If we're looking to these things to feed us, to fill us, to satisfy us, if we're looking for a night on the couch watching Netflix to be our rest and our peace, if we're looking for another holiday so that we're not tired, if we're looking for a relationship to find that love that we crave, if we think that we're going to find our purpose by having more and more titles or things that make us important, those things are only going to leave us feeling hungry. If you've known me for a while, you'll know that I'm a bit of an organizer, and I've always had jobs and roles that involve me being the planner, event manager, program coordinator, all those sorts of things. And I don't really love surprises. I like to know what's happening so that I can be very prepared for those things. When I became a mum, I worked really hard because I didn't want to become a control freak. And so I often tell myself, it doesn't matter, it's all good, because I don't want to miss out on the moment because something's not going the way that I wanted it to go. And about 13 years ago, my husband Andrew and I were living and working in London, and I was working for our church, and I was the organiser of all the events for the church. So I ran all the Sunday services and all the programs and the ministry school, and I managed all the rosters, and anything that was happening, I knew what was going on. I did all the things. And each year we held a weekend away, and everybody from the church would go away together and would have fun time and would have great ministry. And so I organised all of that. I had the run sheets, I had my the folder with who was doing what, who was expected to be where and when, who had paid and who had done this, and I knew everything that was going on. The expectation at the weekend away was that everybody would be part of all the sessions, all the meetings, like a church service. So at these sessions, we'd have praise and worship, and we'd have a speaker and some ministry time. And we wanted everyone to be part of that. We didn't want people just sitting around, in common areas missing out on the ministry. One morning, I found myself outside the kitchen with my folder. Everybody else had gone into the meeting, which was about to start. And I was thinking about what was going to come next after that meeting, thinking, I'll just get this, and this done so that it's ready for when the meeting's finished. And I'll just miss out on that one. It'll be all good. I don't mind. And immediately I heard from God. And I don't know if God speaks to anybody else like this, but he's very sarcastic with me. And I heard him say, "Okay, Martha." So immediately I'm stopped in my tracks. Martha is a woman in the Bible who's friends with Jesus, and Jesus has come to her home for a meal. She's preparing all the food, she's fluffing all the pillows, she's checking the bathroom to make sure her kids haven't left that foamy toothpaste in the basin, she's hiding the laundry, shutting the door so that it looks like her house is tidy. She's doing all the things that need to be done so that she can have visitors, and she's rushing around, and everybody else is just sitting with Jesus, including her sister, who she thinks should be helping her. And so she says to Jesus, "Can you just have a word with her, because Mary's supposed to be helping me with this, and she's not. She's just sitting. I'm doing all the work." And, that's why God says to me, "Okay, Martha," we both got rebuked by the Lord, because, I had chosen wrong. There's nothing wrong with being a Martha in a lot of situations. I'm sure a lot of people here could put their hand up and say, "Yep, I am a Martha." And that's fine. We need the Marthas. Nothing gets done without Martha. But in that moment, and in this moment that I found myself at our weekend away, I was being a Martha, and I'd forgotten that the most important thing was to go and sit at the feet of Jesus and to be in that room in praise and worship and ministry with the rest of my church family. So I immediately put my folder down and I went and joined in on worship. I had chosen wrong, and it was a poor substitute, because I thought that doing all the things and being this and being that was part of my purpose and was important. And in that moment, God just wanted me to be with him. So, what is the flimsy white bread that you are feeding yourself with? What are you trying to fill yourself up with that is really just leaving you wanting more and quite unsatisfied? Maybe like me, you've got an illusion of control, or that your job or the way people see you is going to bring you purpose. Or maybe spending lots of money and trying to accumulate things you think will make you happy. Maybe you're pursuing a relationship with someone, or even just a friend who's fun, but maybe there's not really any substance there, and you're looking for them to bring you comfort and companionship, where God has something else in mind. Jesus says whoever comes to him will never go hungry again, and that the water that he offers will mean that we are never thirsty again. True relationship with Jesus. He is our bread. Jesus is asking us to trust him and to make him our nourishment, for us to lean our full self on God and turn away from the flimsy white breads. Another message would go on to talk about how we can choose to be fed by Jesus and how we allow him to fill all those needs, which I don't have time for today, but a great start is coming to Jesus and recognizing I've been choosing poor substitutes. I'm choosing the flimsy white bread. I'm always left hungry. I try and get love, but I just have to keep searching. I try and get rest and peace, but I just haven't found it. I'm trying to find purpose, but it's eluding me. Maybe talking these things through in your weekly group or with your friends or partner and allowing the Holy Spirit to guide you and show you where it is that you can find real nourishment. You know, the world is watching, and when we get this right, when they see us with true peace, not being rocked around by the things that come our way and when we're having a hard situation, but when we've got true peace, they notice that. Where is that peace coming from? She's not searching all the time. When they see your marriage and your relationships that are based on commitment and unconditional love, when they see that you're passionate and confident in who you are because of whose you are, you know. And when they see that you've got deep satisfaction in life, these things are attractive to other people because these things are different to the world. These things are not something that you can find in the world. They're only things that you can find in Jesus. So I'm going to end my message there. If you would like to have prayer this morning, we are always available. There are going to be leaders down here as we finish. But I just have one word that I just want you to, which is for somebody, and I want you to think about, which yesterday as I was preparing for this, my husband Andrew went to the supermarket for me and bought this sliced white bread. And I said, just get the cheapest that you can find. And he rang and he said, the cheapest is all run out. There's none left. Is it okay if I get, whatever goes up from there? And I thought, well, this illustration really works with the cheapest bread, because you have to compare the cheap with the better. And then I thought, sometimes the things that we are looking to feed us, we think are really good. This bread comes in a nice wrapper, and it probably says things like high in fibre and low in sugar and things like that. But in the end, it's still just cheap white bread, refined flour that's not going to fill you. But sometimes the things that we are looking to fill us, we think are good, and they have a nice wrapper and they can promise certain things. And I just feel like there might be someone or some people here that are thinking, I've been feeding myself on this and I thought it was good, it appeared good, but now that I think about it, maybe the Holy Spirit's revealing to you there's actually something better. When we choose the things that God offers, what Jesus offers, when we have that true relationship with Jesus, where we find rest and peace and love and purpose in Him, then these things they show up as a poor substitute. But I just wanted to leave that with you. If you're feeling like, oh no, these things are bringing me the things that I need, I'm being fed on these, but you're still being left hungry and unsatisfied and still searching and not with that deep satisfaction that only Jesus brings. And if you want to talk about that with somebody, or if you'd like prayer for that, then you're welcome to come forward this morning. Otherwise, we've got a great morning tea planned, and we've got a lovely morning out there. We would love for you all to stick around. We really want to treat and honour the women, and so stay around for a little while and have a wonderful Mother's Day. God bless you all.